All right. Hello, welcome back. I'm back with the podcast, and I am introduced with introduce yourself, mystery man.
All right, I'm Taylor. I'm Alex's friend. We met a few nights on a night out. So,
Yeah. And how were those nights out, in your opinion?
It would have been better if you didn't get kicked out the first time. But
Oh, mate.
you win some, you lose some.
That's a story in itself, no doubt, no doubt whatsoever. So what I did, obviously, a lot of you guys, the audience that are watching this, obviously you would have participated in my polls, and so one comment that Taylor had managed to come up with was, can you explain, Taylor?
It was to do with the evolution of humans, or lack of it in the foreseeable future.
Oh, so you don't mean a biological sense, you mean a social aspect in terms of like the past 6,000 years, for example.
Well, I mean, like it kind of restricts it both. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
If there's no social evolution, then I guess there'll be no physical evolution.
Wait. What do you mean how there's no social evolutions? I mean, that's quite a difference, for example, like Egyptian or Roman times to today, for example.
Right. When I say,
No,
how I'd put it in terms of like like a space race. You know how in the 1960s we had the space race and everyone was trying to get to the moon, and now everyone's trying to get to Mars and everything, but it's no longer countries doing it. It's like individuals, like SpaceX and Blue Origin. It's kind of slowing down, and that's how I kind of see the evolution, like expansion.
Oh, right. Okay. So with respect to what happened in the 60s with the space race, obviously it was Cold War times and stuff like that. So obviously you had the Americans racing against the Soviets to see who can put the first man in space, first man in moon, and stuff like that. So, and then nowadays you're talking about like corporations and private enterprises and stuff like that. So do you feel like there's just no competition anymore?
When it comes to on a national level, I feel like it's just America at this point. I don't feel like any other country is getting involved.
And why do you think that is? Why do you think the Americans all consistently have the edge over in the space exploration, I should say? They're American-based companies, so I wouldn't say America has an interest in it. But it's certainly the likes of, SpaceX and Blue Origin. They're the only people even going to space at this point in time, apart from the people that are working in the National Space Station or International Space Station. Right, gotcha. Okay, and so I have a curious question. Do you think we will go to Mars or not?
It depends. It really does. It depends if, NASA get a bigger budget or SpaceX, improves drastically, but it's not whether or not we'll get to Mars, it's whether we'll be able to sustain life on Mars.
Right, okay. And so with respect to human evolution, okay, let's think of a random scenario for a second. And let's transport ourselves to Mars, okay? So how would you approach in order to sustain life on Mars? If you have any idea at all on how that would even be possible?
To sustain life on Mars, you're going to need at least to go underground first. Just so you lack the radiation poisoning, because they have a lot less atmosphere, which means that, the rays from the sun, it would just... I was watching...
Because the ozone layer is incredibly weak on Mars. Therefore, even, for example, even someone for like me, ethnically, I'm white and black Caribbean, and I do not burn in the sun. Maybe except in Antarctica or something like that, but I just don't burn. I only tan. And I feel like if I ever just set foot Mars, then I think every single human being would be just susceptible just to getting skin cancer for like 3 years, for example, or something like that.
It's something like within 4 years, the probability you get like skin cancer in comparison to being on Earth is something like over 50%. Like it increases just by the lack of atmosphere. You've got nothing to sort of go off that. I mean, the surface on Mars is radioactive in itself.
Okay, so I think, that's true. And do you think as well, we'll having all the resources on Earth, for example, do you really think that we will be able to go to Mars to kickstart the age of space exploration, for example?
Yeah, you know what? There's materials that we can use that can certainly get us to Mars a lot more affordably if they were invested into. There's ideas of a slingshot, and how that works is it's like a tether, okay? You know, it's like a few kilometers long and everything in space, and you've got a counterweight at one end, and you just kind of fling spaceships, and that just saves on fuel.
Yes. What was the physics term? Because obviously I did physics at uni. It's called gravitational something. It's as you said, it's like a slingshot, basically using the orbit of the Earth to then boom straight off into wherever destination that you need to go to. Very fucking clever idea, without a doubt. And also, you are allowed to swear on here if you want to.
Well, it's an option. Like I'm talking about the slingshot here. Like we can do it. Okay. We have the resources to do it. We have the science to do it. We have the engineer capacity to do it at the moment. Like,
no doubt whatsoever. And so the issue is, a lot of people will probably be thinking, like obviously including myself right now, is that why the hell should we go to Mars, for example, when we need to fix a lot of the stuff on Earth, for example, like climate change or stuff like that? What is the need to go to Mars in the first place anyway?
We need to establish at least a second or third home in order to be a safe civilization. And the reason I say that is because, you know, an asteroid, it's like in the history of how long the Earth's been about, the dinosaurs only got wiped out like a few minutes ago. Do you know what I mean? So,
well, you mean
in retrospect, like the Earth's like 4 billion years old. The dinosaurs got wiped out like 200 million years ago.
No. Like 65 million years ago.
65. Well, there you go. Like in like length of time. Do you know how close that is together? Like,
no, you're not wrong whatsoever. So I think, I'm not sure if you know this or not, but during like the lifetime of the Earth, there have been at least 6 massive extinctions. I believe 4 or 5 of those were due to what happened on Earth, i.e., for example, too much oxygen in the air, too much carbon dioxide in the air caused many natural things to die. And then also you have asteroid events like that. They're incredibly rare, like unbelievably rare, but it happened. It just had to happen 65 million years ago. Dinosaurs gone, and then all we have left are chickens, and then that's
and I
it.
think and also another reason is overpopulation. Like the population isn't slowing in certain areas of the world, and it's like we're going to need space not only for people but for agriculture and food production and everything.
Yeah, no doubt whatsoever. Actually, with respect for overpopulation, is there any solution to it, or is it something that we just genuinely cannot stop?
You could definitely put a control on it. The likes of Asia, I think it was Taiwan or Burma.
China. I know what you mean.
No, I'm not sure it was China. It was in East Asia, and it was a relatively small country, like the size of England. But they introduced education, contraception, and a lot more health benefits. So like they introduced hospitals and everything, and because they didn't have a high mortality rate in children, you know, they were having less and less children, and because both women and men were getting educated, you know, the women were having kids later and everything, which also cuts population in half. And then, you know, you start seeing better economic growth and all this. So I think you could definitely limit, but you got to think about it like this: like if 8 billion people or 7.5 billion people have two kids each or have 3 kids each, you know, it will continue to grow no matter where you are.
Okay, I understand, because obviously this is the thing that I have researched in my own time and stuff like that. Is, for example, in places like China, well, not just China, East Asia, like what I'm talking about is China, Korea, Japan, Europe, and I'm assuming the Americas, basically the Western world and East Asia, essentially. What's happening is that they're having what's called a declining population with respect to, so in order to sustain a population, there's what's called the birth rate, which obviously to succeed that, the population will grow. Obviously below that scale, it will well, obviously old people, elderly people, more people will be dying than be born, if that makes sense. And that's what's happening in the Western world at the moment. Whereas a lot of this is a huge problem in Africa, especially for the country of Niger. Do you have any idea what's happening in like these sort of countries, especially like the West?
Definitely in sub-Saharan Africa. I know the population is increasing rapidly.
Oh my God, it's unreal. It's unreal because, for example, in Niger, I believe the average age for the population, the entire population of the country is 14.8 years old or something like that. Because in that type of, when you have like a hybrid of a Muslim, Islamic and African culture as well, it's usually very much encouraged for young women to be married to an older man, and then obviously to have as many children as possible. The more children you have, the more successful in their perspective than you're supposed to be. So the problem is you're having hunger, drought, just as much as you can imagine. And there is also the question of, for example, is there anything to prevent that, or whether if we are able to help them, will they just not stop? Will the population just overpopulate to a point where it's completely unsustainable? Is that what you think, especially in African countries, especially like Nigeria?
Well, I mean, with the growing population, the same, situation as in East Asia. You introduce, like this has been introduced in certain countries where the economy is kind of turned around and gone into the pluses and everything. So it will happen if you give them the right, nutrients to grow. Do you hear what I'm saying? Like you give them healthcare, you give them, contraception, you give them education. The winning formula just kind of works on everything. Like that's just part of life.
That's true, but for example, let's use Nigeria as a case. That is a big country. I think it's about 200 million people, more or less. And it's almost impossible to almost manage a country of that entire scale when it also has so many socio-economical issues as well. Whereas, but one thing that I wanted to bring your attention to is, so would you, for example, if you were prime minister or president or something, okay, let's say prime minister of the United Kingdom, for example, right? Taylor Humphreys, right? PM. Imagine the population, there's too many people in the UK. Let's say that the UK has about, obviously unrealistic number, but 150 million, 200 million, more or less, in that range. What would you do? Would you enact a sort of China policy, 1-child policy, 3-child policy? What would you do? Well,
it depends on our relationship with other countries. If there's a way that we can sort of, how would you go about this? If there was a way that you could advertise other countries to let your citizens come in, for example, Canada.
So you're essentially encouraging emigration.
Yeah, it's like with Australia. I know they go through a lot of
send back all the prisoners over there.
that's not what I mean, but sort of advertise it, like if we've got slums or like favelas, like they do Brazil, like there is an issue with that because not enough people are going to get the attention that they deserve, especially taxpayers and everything. I don't think our population will ever reach that, man. So,
No.
and I don't think I'll ever be prime minister. So I don't think I'll ever have to deal with this issue. But.
No, that's true. I mean, it's like already a difficult question in itself. So don't even worry about that, man. But sorry, go on.
No, I think definitely sort of advertising. There's no real way that you can kind of combat like a growth of over 100% in this country. Are we talking about the whole of UK, or are we talking about England in itself?
I mean, one can only imagine of an independent Scotland or a reunited Ireland. So let's assume that it's the entirety of the UK, for example, but the majority in England.
Okay, the majority in England.
Mm-hmm.
I think you definitely, if I'm not allowed to cause, emigration or anything of the sort, and I'm not allowed to, mass massacre and everything. Not saying I would, but
okay.
The British have done it before.
But, no,
I'd probably see about using, disregarded land up north and sort of, kind of making more jobs around Liverpool area and Manchester up north, because there's a lot of where there isn't a city, there's a lot of just green. There's just a lot of green where you could just expand. I mean,
that is very true.
What's the population of Tokyo? It's an insane number.
40-ish million, more or less.
Exactly. It's like London's only 7 million.
About 8-ish, 9-ish, more or less. So but you also have to think about like the size of Tokyo as well. For example, imagine, I've seen this on a map before, where it's like, for example, it goes all the way from Manchester, like the northeast point, and the very southern east point reaches like Milton Keynes, Luton, St. Albans area. Yeah. It's huge. Imagine trying to get from like central London to Sheffield. That's like going from South Tokyo to North Tokyo. Like,
are you serious?
A bit of an exaggeration, but like you can think of it like that. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
so
it's
quite
huge.
That's crazy. No wonder the house prices over there are just insane.
Bro, like the house prices even in the West, like Europe, America, it's extortionate. But no, nevertheless. Yeah. Also, what I wanted to mention actually was, have you ever looked at age demographics and how the population is divided in ages? Have you ever seen such a thing before?
Yeah, during geography, I did, yeah.
GCSE geography, classic. No worries. So essentially, if you look at it, so imagine, so it should go roughly like that, more or less. I don't know, something like, to keep a sustainable population, the age demographic, I can't even it's like that, for example. I don't know how to explain it properly, but there are more older people than younger people, okay? And so to sustain, and because we are depopulating in a sense, there are going to be a lot more older people, and for example, that is going to be less younger workers, more spending on pensions, for example. Have you ever looked at anything like this? For example, the issue of now young people obviously not undergoing like an aging boom, for example. Have you ever looked at these sort of things before?
No, I haven't. It's never really piqued my interest.
It's definitely something you should definitely look at, because the issue is, for example, in Japan, everything relates to Japan now. Everyone's everything. So about the average age is 49, more or less. It's one of the oldest populations in the world, and not enough people are being born essentially to match, like, for example, one elderly person to one young person, for example. And so the issue with this is that younger people are going to have to work even more harder than their older counterparts. And the older counterparts they're going to have the issue of, oh, my pensions are not even being paid to me. I can't have this, I can't have that because, nothing's being given to me because, we're going to spend too much on pensions, in my opinion. Is that, do you feel like you're going to have... Like, mm-hmm.
Do you understand what a pension is?
More or less.
When it comes to pensions, it's money that the person's already put away, and it's jobs that they've worked, and part of their salary has been put into this pension in either private companies or the company that they're in, or even the government. So it is their money.
Sorry.
At the end of the...
And actually, in that case, then I should mention state pensions.
State pensions. I've not heard of that. I don't.
Because it's also an issue that's going to, for example, affect Spain. Shout out. Quite drastically in the future if it doesn't encourage more younger workers to come into the country. And how do you know how this could affect, for example, younger society in general, attitudes in general, or anything like that? Do you know anything about that?
I could imagine that it would definitely decrease morale if they're having to work a lot harder than their predecessors, their ancestors and everything, their parents and whatnot.
Exactly. Do you feel like you're working a lot already?
I'm as a 19-year-old, it's like I choose to work more.
Okay.
But it's like my parents have given me a set rent and everything. I have to pay a certain amount per month, and it's quite hefty for a 19-year-old. You're looking at like someone who's just coming out of uni and either buying a room or rent. It's almost at a rent level for a 19-year-old who's not even earning, not even working more than 40 hours a week. So it is quite hefty. So
okay,
in a sense, I get what you mean, but that's not really the government. That's my household.
No, exactly. And why do you choose to do a lot of overtime?
Well, I used to. At the moment, it's with college and everything, it's kind of hard to get good grades and do 40 hours a week or 60 hours a week. But I was doing it because who doesn't like money,
Yeah, no doubt. Like for example, actually, what do you want to do after college? Is there like any sort of ambition you want to do?
I'd like to go into maybe the commercial business in terms of like electrical engineering, but this is just electrical engineering, electrician. Starting salary after an apprenticeship is like 30k a year. So it's good off the bat.
That is very good already. And I have to ask, do you feel that you could afford a house in the future, as in buy one?
There's definitely a lot of schemes out there to help, and with certain things that I've done already, at a young age, it's very easy to get approved for a mortgage. All you need is say I was of course, but say all you need is 20k for a deposit for a house, for example, and you're on 30k a year. Say you've already got 5k in your savings, you need to make that 15k a year. If you budget for a year and you save 20k of that, after tax, after say like 25k after tax, you say you live off 5k for a year, you've already got your money.
Wow.
So it is possible. It's like you've got to be willing to put in the work to get to that stage though. And I feel like, you kind of look at it and you're like, do you want to go out and party, or do you want a house? That's the way you go.
No, exactly that. And so do you feel like the attitude that young people like you and I, because obviously I'm, for the viewers that don't know, I'm 21. And so do you feel like young people like you and I just don't work hard enough or don't want to work as hard as perhaps our older counterparts, or maybe such as yourself, for example.
I wouldn't even say they don't want to work hard. I don't think they know, to be honest. Like I didn't know about, how much it takes for a mortgage, or how to get a good credit score until like a few months ago. I'm talking like 8, 9, 10 months ago. I didn't know.
More or
so
less.
it's like, and that's only because I moved out at 18. Like, if I didn't move out, I would still not have that knowledge.
Oh, I didn't know you moved out.
Yeah, I've moved back in with my parents, as previously stated,
right.
but I've still got that knowledge, and it's sort of like an advantage on everyone. But
no, exactly that. I feel like as house prices continuously go up, house prices are really difficult to, for example, to put a perspective on, because it depends on the place and obviously where you want to as well. For example, when people online, in my opinion, talk about house prices, they always usually talk about like spots that people always want. For example, for example, Spain, Portugal, Southern Europe, Mediterranean, European Mediterranean, I should say. Or in America, it could be Pacific West, or, well, to be fair, in America, it could be anywhere, but just somewhere nice. And I feel like...
somewhere on the coast, though, in the coastal states. Not really in Iowa and Montana and everything.
No, exactly. I don't know why anyone would want to move there. No offense to people from Montana or Idaho, but still.
Wow, the amount of land that you can do, like if you've got the land, it's like for the same price of a house in like New York, like $1 million. Do you know how much land that you can buy?
Actually,
what's the one thing that is restricted on this planet that we can't get from space? Is land, bro. You can't get land. Like, as soon as we run out of space for land, bro, that's it.
No, that's true. That is very true. And and also, actually, I don't know if you knew this, right? Only 8% of England's land is public. The rest is all private.
Yeah.
And especially, I feel like land is something that's very much taken for granted, especially in the UK compared to America. In America, it's huge. You can literally do whatever you want. You have desert, whatever. You have all types of landscapes. But in the UK, it's something that does not come cheap whatsoever. And so, for example, imagine if you have a budget of, say, 400 grand, maybe let's go for 400. Okay, you could in America, you could buy a house for like a good size, with a pool as well, maybe with a huge garden or something like that, just in probably in a nice community as well. Whereas in the UK, you could just get like the average standard house that you could rent for like a family of 3 or 4.
I agree with that statement. However, in the houses in America, the houses that you're talking about wouldn't be solid brick bolted to the ground.
Exactly.
Hard during, double panel, double glazed, triple glazed windows, hurricane prone. Yeah, almost if a hurricane, one of the same hurricanes came to the UK, we'd have a lot less like cost in terms of damage.
Yeah, 100%.
Because of the sturdy builds. In most cases, I've seen some of the new builds and everything and falling apart. Like a whole brick walls just falling off the side of houses, which is
that what's happening recently in the UK?
Definitely with the new builds. I mean, there's people on socials and everything just retweeting like brick walls just falling down, and people putting in fake wall plugs and I didn't do this and this. How can I just make it look like that and everything? It's like where we live, the new estate next to Weldon.
Yeah.
The Prize Hall. Their houses. I remember my friend was like just moved in there, and the roof was leaking. You're talking for a new build, a roof to be leaking. It's like the roofs can rip off as well if the wind was strong enough.
Like, for example, like those storms that we recently have. I cannot remember the names because they were just stupid as hell. Like,
Yeah. Storm Eunice.
that was it. Exactly that. But no, those houses and stuff like that. I personally think I'm depending on the disciplines or profession I'll go into, because I'm happy to go into like a good profession or whatever, using my physics or using or maybe going back to uni and doing something different. I don't know, something like that. But I think I probably would be able to, but it massively just depends. That's all. It really just depends on like how willing you're able to go higher, if that makes sense. Because I feel like a lot of people who will remain working class, especially young people, that will remain working class perhaps for the rest of their life, I don't think they'll ever be able to afford rent or anything like that, in my opinion. Afford a house, in my opinion. I think they're going to be, I think a lot of our generation, we're going to be a lot of a rent generation.
If they don't get off their ass,
in the words of Kim K,
if they don't get off their ass and fucking put in the elbow grease and everything, they won't. They'll just be able to afford a car, and they'll just be able to afford rent, and they'll just be able to like raise a kid or two, and that's like maybe with the help of the government. But if you put in, it was something some statistics showing that if you put in an extra 4 hours a week at work overtime, you earn more than like. It's like it was a crazy percentage. I don't want to falsify it or anything, but it was a crazy number. Like, you earn this much more a year. And it's like, wow, for a 4-hour shift on a Saturday, and these people you can just earn so much. And it's like you don't even have to wake up at the crack of dawn. You can wake up at 10, finish at 2.
If you wanted to, exactly. Well, it depends, because obviously companies are not that flexible on their employers, but it is what it is, I suppose.
It is on overtime.
Exactly that. So, Taylor, I want to bring your attention to another comment, the message that you sent to me earlier, which was, if I can bring it up on WhatsApp. So it was along the lines of, just clicked off instantly.
Oh, the history being a sensitive topic.
Yeah, that was it. So it was, history is a dangerous and sensitive topic for someone like me. Explain, please.
Right. I can't, because I'm a white British. We all know that the British in the, history are not the most cleanest, cleanest of history. I mean,
bro,
for some 200 to 400 years, we practically destroyed culture,
civilizations.
For capital gain and tea, like in India. But we've done it's easier for me to list the bad things about Britain than it is the good things, without coming off as a villain myself. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, so essentially what you're saying to me is, let's use me and you as a comparison, okay? So,
well, you're Spanish, I'm Portuguese, so you're not fully clear, my friend.
No. For example, what I wanted to say was, let's go with our ethnicities. White and Black Caribbean, white British, right?
Yeah.
So, if, for example, we're talking about a discussion over Black Lives Matter or civil rights or something like that, right? Does that do you feel like you're already going to get much more criticized than I do for having the same opinion, for example?
Well, it really does depend on what's like opinion we're talking about here.
Like, for example, us using the word nigger. Apparently, it's acceptable for me to use, but not acceptable for you to use.
Well, obviously, I'll get scrutinized a lot more than you ever would. Ever.
But do you agree with that in principle? That the word nigger should only be reserved for black people who used to have obviously a culture of suppression and stuff like that?
I think we should forget about the word. To be honest, yeah, completely. It's an ugly word, and it was used for oppression. What came from a term meaning brother, it has turned into such an ugly word.
I didn't even know that.
It came from when the French, the English, the Germans were taking people from Africa over to America.
Portuguese.
The Portuguese, the Spanish, and everything.
Yeah.
When they were taking, trading with the African tribe leaders for people, they'd hear that like the black people, the Africans, were using, this word, and it's like, so this is what we'll call them. And obviously, it took an ugly turn when they went over to America, and it was a word to keep people under, and that's what the word has turned into. Whenever anyone that is, I'd say, I'd sort of just say white. I mean,
okay.
I feel like people get the most offended by white people using the word.
I personally, for me, I never get offended over it. Like, it only depends on the context. It's the same. For me, it's the same when you call, obviously, an Asian like a chink or a yellow bastard or something like that. I shouldn't laugh. I shouldn't have laughed there. But other things like you terrorists, you Muslims, or something like that, or like these sort of things. They're all, in my opinion, they're all equal. But I also think that using, obviously, the word, I think using the word nigger it's like, even amongst, for example, black people themselves, I never use the word, in my opinion. There's no reason for me to. I had been raised, by by a European mum in a European country. And therefore, for me, it has not much of a meaning to me. Whereas for my dad, for example, on the other hand, it's like a big deal to him, Like, personally for me, I just don't see it whatsoever. Like for me and you, we're both equals. To me and another black guy, we're both equals. For me, and for mostly, and definitely for you, there's no question about it that all of us humans, like mama, what race, we're brothers in arms, Like for example, in Russia and Ukraine for a minute, it's just Putin doesn't believe that Ukraine should run as they basically the same thing. That's that Ukraine doesn't have any sovereignty. It's the same thing when white people say to blacks, "Oh, you have no culture." You had like back then, centuries ago. It's very confusing what I'm saying now, but I hope you understand where I'm coming from. And what else do you feel like it's sensitive and a bit dangerous to talk about? Like controversial things that would maybe go against you or something like that. What would it be?
Whoa. To be honest, I've got to say the British history is probably the one thing, or just white history as a whole is the biggest target for me. It's like your ancestors did this and this and this. And, you feel guilt about it. It's like I didn't do it, but do
you feel guilt?
I do feel guilt about it.
Why should you?
Why should I feel guilt? Because it was a horrible thing to happen. It's like I feel guilty for the Germans because I feel guilty on behalf of the Germans for putting the Jewish through the Holocaust and everything, because my heritage links back to Germany and everything. So it's like it's not me, but it's ancestors and then the descendants of my ancestors which did this and everything. It's like I shouldn't, because it's in the past, and you can, if you're focused on the past, you can't move on to a brighter future.
No, that's true. I think that's the whole point of, for example, using 27th of January, Holocaust Memorial Day, for example. It's obviously not an intent whatsoever to guilt, but just to a reminder for the future generations from then on, in that moment when the concentration camps were discovered in 1944-45. And then obviously it's just a reminder. Like, it's not meant to guilt you for anything whatsoever. In my opinion, you should not feel any guilt whatsoever. But you should always just remember that this stuff happened. And if a decision, and for example, then at that point where somebody else makes a remark, for example, about, you know, anti-Semitism or something like that, that's when you can kind of step in and say, wait, hold up a second. 1, shut the fuck up. 2, etc., etc., etc. Do you know what I mean? Like, you should not feel guilt. You should just simply remember the events that happened in the past and ensure and enforce that shit does not happen again. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, I know. History will always repeat itself. I mean, with what happened, with the you know, bribing the tribe leaders and everything, and paying them, you know, with riches and, you know, resources and everything, and then taking their personnel over to, you know, the Caribbean and, you know, South America and everything. That is being repeated just in like worlds of like the Chinese. They're not actually doing the same thing, but in essence they are. It's like they are using slavery. It's like they're using their own people as slaves.
Okay.
And it's like the attention of them. It's a massive difference. It's poles apart, but it's in the same category. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand. It's
slavery is still a thing.
Yeah, but just people, like, compared to what we read in the history books, like slavery today, it's just now, it's the same concept, but just in a completely different form, if that makes sense. It's like, it's so hidden away that you would never know if like the 2 people are walking behind you or in front of you could be a slave, for example. I think the biggest countries, I think, for example, India, that's a huge, and even across Europe as well. For example, that is.
Do you know where the term slave came from?
Wait, the what slave?
The term slave. Do you know where it came from?
No idea.
It derived from the Slavs, so the Slavic people, because they never, in history, they never built up an army or a strong enough army to defend themselves. So
Wait,
when,
from who?
you know, from the Prussians, the French, you know, the people like the, the Turks and everything, and, you know, even the Russians and everything, they'd take them and they call them, you know, Slavs, which are then derived down to slaves and everything. That's where the term came from.
That's interesting, because in Spanish we say esclavo, for example, for the word slave, and in Portuguese I think it's the same. Well, in all Romance languages they're mostly the same, more or less. But yeah, that does sound interesting. I definitely have to like confirm and verify the etymology, but it does, that theory does sound interesting though, without a doubt. And do you actually? I have a question that will also link into the next thing that we'll talk about as well, which is, do you think that in the past, so obviously when talking about history, let's talk about Victorian England, for example.
Okay.
With respect to marriage, okay, do you think that it was a form of slavery when a man obviously considered, obviously when a man and a woman obviously married back in those times and way before that as well, because it was considered that the woman was the man's property, would you consider that a form of slavery?
First, you've got to look at what the definition of slavery is. Okay, and
Shall we have a look?
Yeah, go for it now.
All right,
because I word for word, I have no idea what slavery means.
So the Oxford English Dictionary says slavery, the state of being a slave. That's it. Define slave, not slavery. My bad. Define slave. So, especially in the past, A person who is the legal property of another and is forced to obey them. That's what it says.
Yeah. So the legal property side of it, I wouldn't say no, they're not a slave. However, it was sort of inescapable at that point. So maybe not the legal property, but certainly maybe, you know,
But is it slavery if it's legal?
You know what? Probably not. No, I wouldn't like it. Well, when I say probably not, no, like it still is slavery. Like, you know, you don't have to legally be property of someone to be a slave. You know, if I kidnapped, you know, one of my friends or something. Well, no, I wasn't going to use you just because, you know, PTSD and everything. But say I took one of my friends and I just forced them to do jobs for me for next to nothing. It's like he's not my legal property, but he is my slave and everything. So it was an inescapable practice, I'd say, the marriage back in the Victorian times. But you have to really look at certain situations. You can't really generalize the whole era on you know, a lot of stories. But certainly for the majority, it was, you know, you get married into a family, more like. But certainly for the poorer side of it, I wouldn't necessarily say it was slavery. But certainly for the aristocrats, the rich and everything.
Oh, so depending on class, it was defined as slavery and not slavery.
I'd say that there were a lot of unhappy housewives from like journals and everything like that. You do get you hear about, and it's like, you know, they can't. Divorce was frowned upon. If you divorced back then, you got isolated, alienated from society.
Okay.
So it was sort of inescapable in a way. But then again, if you're that rich, you don't really have to put in the work. You've got butlers and you've got maids and everything. So
yeah, exactly.
You know.
And obviously nowadays, that it's escapable if you wanted to, or if you really wanted to. It's not a problem anymore, I suppose. Well, not a problem in general, you know.
In the modern Western world, it's in European, North American. I go far to say it's like Africa, probably. I'm not too sure on the politics in Africa and South America.
I don't know. South America, it would be the same as in the West. I think mostly, in my view.
Well, in the eyes of like the Middle East, I can imagine it being a lot more difficult.
I don't think it's a lot more difficult. I think it's, especially, for example, states like Iran, Saudi Arabia, countries under an Islamic theocracy, for example. Well, that's the term described. Where, well, essentially, do you know what a theocracy is?
No.
So a theocracy is a form of government that is essentially governed by religion. For example, like for example, the Vatican right now is what's called a Christian theocracy. What's happening in Saudi Arabia is like a Sunni Islamic theocracy, and Iran is like a Shia Islamic theocracy. It's all confusing, but that's basically what it is. Yeah. I've got to say now.
You're on about marriage in these countries, and how it's harder to get out.
That was it. That was what I was going to talk about. So I think it's still inescapable, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely, and I feel like it definitely the women over there get a very bad rep. I mean, you know, if you get raped as a bride, as a partner of someone, you get punished. I think that's bad.
No, 100%. So I remember I was watching a show. It's called Gloria. It was like the first Portuguese series on Netflix. I highly recommend it. So essentially, I think it was like the second or third episode. So you had these two couples. So this was 1960s Portugal. So at the time, the government was very conservative, corporatist, national Catholicist, to say the least. And it was common. It was common for a man to be to a man to consider their wife as their property, for example, and then a lot of sexual violence happens in that, and there's nothing the woman could do about it at that time until the transition to democracy happened. Then sort of attitudes changed a lot, especially with that. And so I just want to ask you a question, Taylor. Do you want to get married one day?
Yeah, it'd be nice.
To woman, man, whatever. Yeah, woman, I assume.
To you, Alex. I've had a insane crush on you ever since I met you. No, I think definitely edging towards women. You know, I'm not bisexual.
Oh,
at the
okay.
moment, I haven't discovered any gay passion. So probably a woman. You know?
Okay.
Dude, that's even if I make it to marriage. That's even if I make it to 27. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. I love how you mentioned 27 because that's the age when musicians die.
Yeah, it's a goal. You know, if I'm getting to my late days, I'd like to have someone there with me. You know,
that's actually sweet what you said. I'm not gonna lie.
It's like, despite of like, you know, like, I'd like to have at least a good friend with me in the last final days of my life. You know.
Yeah, so exactly.
It wouldn't really matter, but you know, with the marriage, you know, seeing your offspring grow up, I can imagine it can be quite a beautiful sight.
Without a doubt. No, without a doubt whatsoever. I feel that obviously marriage today it's not a controversial topic by any means, but it's the way that you look at the past and you look at it now that opinions vary so much, if that makes sense. So typically for married couples, in the past they used to have a lot more rights than single men and especially single women, for example. Now today that everyone has equal rights, but married people still do have some advantages. Yeah,
with certain like tax benefits and, you know.
Yeah, exactly. For example, they can basically join bank accounts. So instead of having two separate, you can just have one, and that would technically be administered by both parties. I think. I'm not sure how that sort of banking system works, but if it works, it works. No problem.
You both got access.
Exactly. So the question which I wanted to ask you, and to which I asked the audience, is let me go on Instagram again because it's okay. So let's have a look. Hopefully don't get copyrighted on that. So that was the question. So you basically, so for the audience as well, you strongly disagree, agree, disagree, or strongly disagree. So the statement was, marriage no longer works in today's society. And for people who watch this video later, I don't know if you can see that whatsoever. Oh no, you just cannot see that.
No, the saturation and the exposure on it, man. So
out of a vote of 3 plus 18, 21, 66, 74. Out of 74 people, I know that's not many, but it's a okay sample size, I suppose. So 4% voted strongly agree that it just does not work, that it no longer works in today's society. 24% agree generally, 61% but disagree, and 11% strongly disagree. So we can come to the conclusion that the audience mostly disagrees with the statement that marriage still works in today's society. What did you put in the poll?
Oh, I put disagree. I disagree. But I do have a two pence to add to that. I feel that social media definitely corrupts marriage in terms of like the art of temptation. Do you know what I mean? It's so much more tempting to, you know, if you don't have social media, and you go to work, and you go out and you go home, and, you've got your interests, you've got your hobbies and everything, you go to the gym and everything. It's very hard to cheat on your partner. However, with social media, it's a lot easier to be unfaithful.
Right, because in my words, would you say there's a lot of pick and choose, for example?
Pick and choose. Go into further detail when you say that.
So, for example, pick and choose probably wasn't the correct phrasing there. But what I wanted to say was, because the world is so interconnected, there is like an abundance of people on social media. That literally you could all of a sudden meet another soulmate literally 2 days later. Obviously, that, like, if you're in a tight community, like in a village or stuff like that, like, that was not going to happen. Literally, you're going to marry this boy or marry this girl, whatever. But then now it's like, okay, I'm with this girl. Okay, let's say if it was me, for example. I'm with this girl, for example, and then literally I only have this, and it would only take me a few days to be like with her, and then boom, for example.
That's what I'm talking about. It's people more, quick to move on and get someone new. And it's like no one really wants to stick around with the problems and everything.
This is what I'm afraid of being in a relationship, is the fact of somebody could turn off at any point, and that
you can't change their mind.
There's nothing you can do about it. Maybe, like, no matter, like, for example, people, don't get me wrong, people do fall out of love. And what I find that, obviously people talk about, you need to do this, you need to do that. I think all of that is bullshit. I think I think both people, I think the most healthiest way a relationship could be is by putting, I don't know, a lot of energy into obviously yourself. You go to work, for example, that's if you choose to work, or if you're in education, you educate yourself, and if you work, you earn money or something like that. But then I feel like you have a value. That value can be up to you, depending on how big your ego is or how unfortunate your ego is. Like, maybe you don't have an ego, whatever. But everybody has a value. And if another person comes in, and if that person, whether he, she, or whatever, does not bring added value to you, then there's absolutely no point in being in a relationship, because that is going to go negative, and it's going to be valued less.
Is that your opinion on that?
I would say it's a sort of opinion, or sort of slight truth, I believe. Okay. I think. Does that make sense to you?
You don't feel like people can just love for the sake of loving? You don't think people can just get along? If you find a girl, she's just got a kicking personality, she's beautiful and everything, like, she's intelligent, she's smart, she's got a life in order and everything, she's a good girl, 10 out of 10 in every aspect. However, she doesn't bring anything else to the table that you haven't already got. It's not worth it.
I don't think so, because the whole other point of being in a relationship is to also, like, just enjoy each other's company as well, and that also adds value as well, by also just being best friends with each other, as well as lovers in a sexual relationship as well. Like, not all relationships are sexual, but for the most part, yes. Like, I think so. Like, even though she's a 10 out of 10, my type and whatsoever, if like, I cannot, like, if in my life I cannot maybe even sort myself out, then there's no point, if that makes sense. Because obviously some people will disagree with me on here, because it's kind of two interpretations in terms of, one, if I'm not at the best I already am alone, like, for example, then then obviously there's no need for me to be in a relationship, whatever. But even if I do, then why not?
No,
like, come join.
No one needs to be in a relationship, though. That's the thing. It's more of a want, like, especially in in this society. Like, you don't ever need to, like, you're not on famine. You don't have a worry of, like, you're gonna die any day, so you need to spread your seed and all this. So it's like, I feel like it's probably best if you just work on yourself until you're ready to have a relationship, and then you don't need someone adding something to you because you're already at the best. But I get what you mean in terms of, like, they slow you down if you're not at your best. If they can work with you and you can work with them, then yeah, I get what you're saying.
All it is just is literally just codepending on each other. That's it. What do you think about, for example, I remember seeing on Reddit about this argument and discussion, is that people who want a relationship, which, to be honest, could genuinely be most of the audience watching. We don't really know, to be honest, exactly, obviously. But for the people who are single but want to be in a relationship, but they know that they can feel their best in a relationship, is that possible? Can you see that through?
I feel like when you have a need, like you desperately want to be in a relationship, that is definitely not the point to get into a relationship. But the reason I say that is because it's like, you've got to get stronger by yourself. Like, you can't just depend on everyone. You can't go through your life depending on everyone. You won't get. You won't improve. Like, if you're constantly depending on someone to bring you happiness, like, you're gonna end up depressed.
That is exactly. That's where the toxicity comes from, and then that's also what you said earlier about. What I said earlier about switching off as well, is that if I'm in a relationship that I desperately wanted to go into, I think it's just for the sake of being in a relationship, not actually wanting to spend, like, valuable time with the actual person, if that makes sense.
Yeah. If you want to be in a relationship, then you don't value the person. If you value the person and you want to be in a relationship, you've got a better chance of long lasting and actually loving, potentially even going on to marriage. And it's like, you shouldn't date to be in a relationship. You should date for marriage every single time, because then
that's what a lot of East and Southeast Asian cultures do. They literally date to marry. In terms of, for example, if I was a Vietnamese girl, right, and you were like some Western white boy, right, obviously, which you are, then literally, like, you should only consider me to date if you are literally wanting to consider marriage in the future.
Yeah, that's how you got to be. Like, I've dated a few girls, and it's like, one of them, it was like, I could see myself with you, on a honeymoon, and then, with kids and everything. And then another one, it's like, celebrity. I'm a celebrity. Get me out of here. Like, it's like, I don't feel, I don't feel the connection or anything.
It's kind of like, that is the other problem of actually getting into one, is that you really feel, okay, if you personally feel like you have a connection with the other person and you are in a relationship and such things like that, then once you're actually in there, it's actually being able to just not, it's like politics. It's like clinging onto power. It's like a coup d'etat, for example. You have the support, you have everything, and then once you're actually there, once, like, okay, I'm actually going out with you, it's kind of like, in politics, you would think, how do I actually, like, hold on to power? It's the same thing. How do I hold this relationship on? Well, if you really wanted to be with that person, then you already know what to do. It's the same thing in politics. You should already know what to do. This is why the great. I know this is really going from marriage to relationship to dictators, but, like, everything connects together without a doubt, and
Yeah.
that is what makes everything great, in my opinion. Personally, for me, like I've tried before, but I like right now, personally, I feel great, in my opinion. I am
Yeah.
good.
Well, that's good. You know, that's good affirmations that you're saying as well. It's,
Thank you,
you know,
thank you.
you've got to believe in yourself before anyone else does.
100%. I do, definitely. I'm always at my best when I'm also with other people as well as on my own as well. But no,
Yeah.
and Taylor, how are you? You're not in a relationship right now, are you? You don't have a
Nope.
girlfriend? No,
I
not
do
at the
not
moment.
know.
And when was the last time you went out with somebody?
You know, I had a few things I had to solve personally and everything after, like in terms of like living situations and everything. But I've got to say it's coming up to a year. A year in the end of May, so 9 months ago. No, well, not even that. Jesus, it would have been about 10, 11 months ago. So it's been a while, but you know, before then, it was a year-ish before then. So you know, I'm about due for another one. You know what I mean?
Nice.
I'm not rushing anything. You know,
No,
I've had girls that I've talked to and you know got along with and spoke to. You know, late night drives and big Tesco trips. But it's like at the end of the day, if you don't feel it. And you don't know within the first 2 weeks if you really want to get with this girl or not. It's easier to just let that confusion be a determining factor and say, look, I'm not sure I really want to talk to you anymore. And it's easier to just let them go there and then.
Yeah, 100%.
Because if you don't, you know, all their mates think you're a dickhead and you just get it. And everyone bad books and you know, something you don't want to be is like a player, bro. It's not a good look.
No, exactly that. That's the other issue in itself where I wanted to mention. It just literally just left my head now. I think it was that was it. Yeah. So I think me and my friends in Madrid, we had this discussion. For anyone watching, the Guiris in Madrid. So, I think most of us unanimously agreed that 3 weeks is kind of the max, that by talking to someone and then you want to see them, hang out with them, and you know, just do stuff together.
Yeah.
It's basically being mates as well as, you know, just like typical like love dating, you know. And then that's pretty much it. Like 3 weeks after that, it's kind of like it's not really worth it. I'm like, wait, both people are waiting for so long, and that's what makes long distance relationships so difficult at the same time as well. It's like
it's sort of like electron theory, bro. The way long distance relationships work, the further they are away from you, bro, the less attraction you're gonna have to keep them there.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Would you ever consider a long distance?
I used to have this girl that I spoke to down in Guildford. I say have this girl. I used to talk to this girl. I used to, you know, sort of date, just FaceTime a lot and everything down in Guildford. And it was like, that was before I could drive, and now I can. And it's a 4-hour drive, you know, there and back. And it's just like that effort to go see them. And obviously, at this age, it's just not right.
Yeah.
To go, you know, if it was your wife and she had to move away from business, or if you had to move away from business, you know, you have a commitment.
No, exactly.
Where you're just boyfriend and girlfriend, it's not going to work. Like when your girlfriend goes to uni, mate, you might as well just break up there and then, because that's it.
Okay.
That's what happened.
Okay, that's understandable. Because obviously to the viewers as well, I obviously had the poll, which was, the question was, long distance is easy with the right person. So 10% strongly agree, 30% agree, 51% disagree, and 9% strongly disagree. So it's it's more of a 3 to 5, more or less. So three people agree, 5 disagree. I think my maths is not great on that one, but that's like. And what do you think about that? Obviously, as you said, you disagree with that. It's not easy, or did you strongly disagree?
I'd say under conditions, not necessarily the right person, but under conditions, you have to make long distance work. Like, if say you have a wife, for example, she moved away, 100 miles to go, continue her career. You don't want to cut her down. You don't want to, stop her career. And especially if you have kids or other commitments, it's like you can't. You can't put that.
Yeah.
Look, if you move away, we're gonna have to get a divorce. Like, but with in terms of relationships, sort of, girlfriend boyfriend status, dating status, like it's not worth it. It's like, because everyone craves the same 3 things in life: money, food, and sex. So it's like you can't get that with long distance and everything.
No, you're missing one of 2. That's it. And
if the long distance was like you don't see them for 5 days and then you saw them on the weekends, it'd be easier to do. It'd be a lot easier to do.
100%. Like that is something I'd go along for sure. But actual long distance, like I obviously move between England and Spain a lot, and I'm going to Portugal soon, and hopefully I'll be getting a job there as well. And like the problem is for me with moving is that, for example, there was a girl I was talking to when I was in Spain. This was about October time, more or less. It was my mate's birthday actually. I got refused entry in the club and I went off my own. But anyway, I met her on like the night out, and then spoke to her. Like, I'd say, like, I talk to her like occasionally, but not too often. But anyway, so there was time we couldn't meet up on the weekday because she was too busy with uni. I was working. I could only see, like, if there was a possibility, I could only see her like one time. She was always busy with her other mates as well, and the way, like, sometimes the way dating in Spain goes is usually a lot of girls would feel more comfortable if, for example, a lot of girls would feel more comfortable if a date I should say, meets the friends as well, and then obviously I feel like the girl wants to see like how he acts, like whether if he's different, like just alone with me or alone with or with the group as well, just see how he is. And also it's kind of like that kind of like approval as well. If he's in good spirit, if he's in good spirits, good approval, whatever, then she's good to go. But obviously bad, she wants the advice of her friends. That's how dating works in Spain, more or less. And so but personally I prefer to be I prefer like alone first, to like get to know each other before like meeting mates then after. If that makes sense. So it's it depends.
Opposite. It's opposite to how they prefer it.
Exactly that. And so because of like conflicting stuff as well, like we just couldn't meet. And then I told her like, listen, I have to move back to England. Like, can't find another job. And then it was like, oh well, it is what it is. But
could you not have met her with your friends and her friends?
What, both together?
Yeah.
That was a possibility, but I think I was busy that day. I had some other stuff going on Saturday. I think I was working. It was one particular Saturday where we could have, but I just did not have enough time whatsoever. It would have been like 20 minutes, half an hour, but no, I'd rather have like 2-3 hours, eat something, have a few beers, and then we go separate ways, do our own thing and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But no, it is what it is. But overall, in my opinion, long distance doesn't work for me. It's I just can't. I would rather have the person like in a reasonable reasonable traveling distance and stuff like that.
What would you consider long distance?
Good question. I would say like, for me, long distance definitely is like something like England to Spain, or like cross country.
Yeah.
Whereas, oof.
What would you say the mile cutoff is? So like when you go, that's a bit too far to do that every week.
50 mile, I reckon.
50 miles. So just, say Birmingham, for example. You wouldn't date anyone in Birmingham.
No, but Birmingham is like actually like, for me, it's easy to get to. So Birmingham is like possible. I would include Birmingham in the traveling distance range, but like somewhere like Manchester, Liverpool, some of that I'm like just not familiar with. I would say like longer than an hour and a half via transport, so like train, like London would be fine for me because it's easy to get to. Obviously it's easy to get to for us. Northwise I consider further than Sheffield and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you wouldn't go any further than Sheffield.
Yeah. What would you consider long distance actually?
Say anything more than like 3 towns over. Like if someone lives like, I'd say Market Harbour is probably my cut-off point, because I don't really like Market Harbour. Probably someone in Oakham, Wellingborough. I would never date anyone from Peterborough. I would never date.
Oh, fucking Peterborough! My God, I hate that place so much. It's unreal.
It's a scary place, bro.
No, without a doubt. I hate Peterborough. The first thing you should do when arriving in Peterborough is leave. That is the undoubtable thing you should do. But no, nevertheless. Yeah. So Taylor, do you think we should wrap this podcast to a close?
Yeah, you know what? I think we've covered everything. I feel like we've got on.
Yeah, and did you enjoy today?
I've enjoyed it thoroughly. So thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely no worries. And to our lovely audience, actually, Taylor, do you have any closing comments to our lovely audience?
Alex has certainly picked my brain apart. So if you want to do this, just hit him up and ask him about it.
You're welcome, man. You're welcome. And so for any of the audience that genuinely wants to come on here like Taylor did today, and yeah, if you want to do a podcast, let me know on Instagram at Delporto_8. But yeah, follow Taylor on Instagram as well. And yeah, and then that's it, I think. Anything else? No, was that it?
No, that's it from my end.
All right. In a bit, guys. Ciao.
Ciao.
All right. Sweet. Well done. Right, stop.